The silent scream. I've been a cop for almost 20 years, and I've seen things that would make most people lose sleep for the rest of their lives. But nothing could prepare me for what happened that night, the night I answered the call at the old Carlson factory. It was a stormy evening, the kind where the rain pounds relentlessly and the wind howls like a pack of wolves. I was just starting my shift when the call came in. Dispatch said a security guard at the abandoned factory reported strange noises and lights. It wasn't the first time someone reported something odd there, but it was usually just kids messing around. I grabbed my raincoat and flashlight and headed out. The factory was on the outskirts of town, a crumbling relic of better days. It had been abandoned for years after a tragic accident claimed the lives of several workers. People said the place was haunted, but I never put much stock in ghost stories. The rain intensified as I pulled up to the factory gates. I could barely make out the shape of the massive building through the downpour. I parked my cruiser and made my way inside, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Officer Reynolds, police department," I called out, but my voice was swallowed by the sound of the storm. I made my way through the main hall, the sound of my boots echoing off the walls. The place was a labyrinth of rusted machinery and decaying offices. I checked each room, finding nothing but silence and shadows. The only light came from the occasional flicker of my flashlight. As I moved deeper into the factory, the air grew colder, and the sense of unease intensified. I heard a noise behind me and spun around, my heart racing. There was nothing there, just my imagination, I told myself, shaking off the feeling. I reached the security office and found the guard sitting at his desk, staring blankly at the monitors. His face was pale, and his hands trembled. "Sir, are you okay?" I asked, but he didn't respond. I touched his shoulder, and he jolted as if waking from a nightmare. "Officer, thank God you're here," he stammered. "I saw ... something on the cameras. In the basement." "What did you see?" I asked, my unease growing. "I don't know," he whispered, "but it wasn't human." I nodded, trying to stay calm. "Show me." He led me to the monitors and rewound the footage. The screen showed a dark, shadowy figure moving through the basement, its movements jerky and unnatural. I couldn't make out any details, but something about it sent a chill down my spine. "Stay here," I told the guard. "I'm going to check it out." He nodded, relief and fear warring on his face. I made my way to the basement entrance, my flashlight flickering, as if protesting what it was about to illuminate. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended, each step echoing in the oppressive silence. The basement was a maze of pipes and storage rooms. Water dripped from the ceiling, forming dark puddles on the floor. I swept my flashlight back and forth, searching for any sign of the figure from the video. Suddenly, the temperature dropped even further, and my breath came out in white puffs. I heard a whisper, soft and indistinct, like someone speaking just out of earshot. I followed the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned a corner and saw a figure standing at the far end of the hallway. It was tall and gaunt, its skin stretched tight over its bones. Its eyes were empty sockets, and its mouth hung open in a silent scream. "Police." "Don't move," I shouted, but the figure didn't react. I took a step closer, my flashlight illuminating its ghastly form. It suddenly turned its head towards me, and I felt a wave of cold wash over me. The figure began to move, gliding towards me without moving its legs. I raised my gun, my hands shaking. "Stop. I'll shoot." It ignored me, closing the distance with unnatural speed. I fired, the shots deafening in the confined space. The bullets passed through the figure as if it were made of smoke. Panic set in, and I turned to run, but the figure was suddenly in front of me, its empty eyes boring into mine. I felt a cold hand grip my wrist, and my vision blurred. The whispering grew louder, filling my mind with incoherent murmurs. I stumbled back, breaking free from its grip. I ran blindly through the basement, the whispering echoing in my ears. I reached the stairs and scrambled up, bursting into the main hall. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. I found the guard where I left him, his eyes wide with terror. "We need to get out of here," I gasped. He nodded, and we ran towards the exit. The factory seemed to twist and turn around us, the hallway stretching impossibly long. I heard footsteps behind us, heavy and relentless. We reached the main doors and burst outside, the storm greeting us with a fury. I turned to look back and saw the figure standing in the doorway, watching us with those hollow eyes. It raised a skeletal hand and pointed at me, the whispering growing louder until it was a deafening roar in my head. We drove back to the station in silence, both of us too shaken to speak. I filed my report, but I left out the part about the figure. Who would believe me? They'd think I'd lost my mind. But I knew what I saw, and the guard did too. We agreed never to speak of it again, but the memory haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was still watching, waiting. A week later, the guard disappeared. No one knew where he went, but I had a good idea. I tried to put it behind me, but the whispering never left. It followed me, growing louder each night. And now, as I sit here writing this, I can feel the cold creeping in. The shadows in my room are moving, and I can hear the whispering again. It's louder than ever, and I know it's only a matter of time before it comes for me. If you're reading this, stay away from the Carlson factory. There's something there, something that shouldn't exist. And once it has its eyes on you, it never lets go.